We'll get started in just a second.
That's all right. Push hard. That's it. That helps.
Okay, Kevin.
I'm rolling.
You can go in just a touch. There you go. All right. So
what happened was, here I was an undergraduate. See, I didn't have my bachelor's degree yet, and yet here I was yanked away, and the local board wasn't very happy with it. But not much they could do about it because it turned out that it must have been something from old General Groves. See, so anyway. When I got to Chicago then, I saw that my physics professor was there, and he said, well, Dick, after you learn this stuff and everything and write it up, why, I'll write to the university and they will give you your degree. Well, that was a great idea for me, you know, because what the heck here, I was going to work with these really famous people and get paid for it, and maybe I'd get my degree besides. So that's the way I started.
So what exactly happened in Chicago?
Oh, that was the well, there's a long story, of course, but
Well, if you can compress it down for me.
well, in Chicago, you see, well, what had happened was that they had decided. The way the Manhattan district started, there was people scattered all over the country. So pull them all together because that wasn't working very well, and put it at Chicago under Compton, which is what they did, and it worked out okay. The idea was. Now, I suppose you've heard of the first pile.
Yeah, but I want to, forgive me, but I want to kind of move. I mean, I'd like to hear that you worked with Fermi, but I'm more interested in the work that you did here in Los Alamos.
Yeah, well, okay, why don't we just skip that then?
Okay.
Because I worked on the first pile and under the direction of various people, and you know what the first pile was.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, then once that was over, got transferred here to Los Alamos, and that was a couple of years then at working with Fermi and those guys, and I had a great time. But so then I came to Los Alamos, and they told me get off the plane and get off the train at Lamy. Hell, Lamy didn't amount to anything in those days, and so I got off the train there, being brash and everything, and I saw this guy walking up, coming up, obviously looking for somebody. So I said, oh, that must be looking for me. So I went and introduced myself, and it was Oppenheimer. And Oppenheimer says, oh, you're going up to the hill, are you? And I said, yeah. He says, okay, come on. And he piled me in the back of his car and took me up to 109 East Palace and got all the necessary permits and all that, and away we went. What he was doing, he had come down to, I think he'd come down, I forget what he was looking for. I think it was either Vannevar Bush or one of the big wheels, you know, and
So
thing.
when they sent you down from Chicago, did you know you'd be working on a bomb or anything like that?
Oh yeah, because there was never any secret as far as a certain number of people were concerned. We already knew, you see, the way I can explain it is that we built the first pile, Now the first POW was really the fundamental thing. Once we found out that you could make these reactions work, and it was quite a job, then what happened was they started out with Hanford, and they started out with Oak Ridge. And so part of the people went from Chicago went to Oak Ridge, and part of the people went to Hanford, and I came to Los Alamos. That's the way they worked the thing.
What was your specialty?
Electronics mainly, although I was taking my degree in physics. So electronics was different, of course, in those days. They had tubes and stuff, and so well, it was in those days there was no such thing as, well, I think Hewlett Packard was just getting started. I think they were making some sort of an instrument and things like that. So it was quite a different thing. There was no such thing as transistors, no such thing as what you have today, and so it was quite different. And so on the first POW, I had made helped to make some of the stuff to control the pile. See, and that's an interesting story, but we won't go into it.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to. What happened to you in Los Alamos? What was your job up in Los Alamos?
Well, when I got here, they assigned me to the electronics group. Now, the electronics group was a very interesting group because there was only see, in those days, Los Alamos had staff members, and if you wore a white badge, then you could talk to anybody else about what was going off if he had a white badge. But there was a lot of other guys that had yellow badges and so forth, and they were construction people and all kinds of things. So this is the way they kept tabs on the secrecy, and it worked pretty good. But there was never any requirement, I think, that you couldn't talk to anybody else as long as he had a white badge. Why, you could talk to him because they were known as staff members. That's all there was, staff members and so forth.
So did you have a white badge?
Oh yeah.
Oh, could you tell me that in a complete statement then?
Well, if you look at the old pictures, why you can tell who had the white badge, because usually they were the people that got photographed and things. But the idea then was, it was just catch as catch can, see, because, you know, it was done in a hurry and everything, and there was nobody, there wasn't any picture badges or anything like that. You just had a white badge and with a number on it, and that was it to start with.
I wanted you to tell me, because you didn't say it yet, but I wanted you to say, I went there, I was in electronics, and I had a white badge.
That's right.
And I worked, so if you could tell me those words, that would
Well,
help.
I was in electronics, and what my specialty was radiation. So sort of got assigned to it as a what would you call it, a little side specialty. And of course, I had to start with, when I got here, I didn't have that degree yet, so it was necessary for me to I specialized. You see, I had learned quite a bit from the stuff at Chicago, and also from my school work in Denver, and so it was easy. It was what you might call a specialty in electronics. Rather an interesting specialty because nobody really knew an awful lot about radiation and things. There was a lot of people did know about radiation, and there's really a lot of good stuff in the literature about this, but not where we were going. Yeah, is the only way I could explain it.
So what exactly did you do with radiation up there?
Oh, okay. You see what you had to do. You see, people didn't just. I was assigned to Dr. Hempelman for a while, who was an MD, and the thing is, but people just weren't haphazard about health and stuff like that. People might think so, but they weren't. And so what I had to do, and the people working for me, I had 2 or 3 people, were to make instruments to measure the radiation from various experiments, and basically it was a health problem. And this has gone on through all the years and still goes on, but so it was necessary then to have somebody who knew something about this. Of course, it was very different in those days because we didn't have the all the thousands and millions of dollars that have been poured into the radiation business that nowadays.
So what exactly did you have to do? Did you have to invent things? I mean,
Yeah. Well, that was the whole point. There was not. Well, in the first place, you see, the radiation and things that we were interested in now was going to be much higher value, much greater than what had heretofore gone before the what you would call the stuff that went on in the literature and so forth. Yeah. And but now then we got a problem because here I would get these instruments like Victorine or somebody like that, and by golly, they were all too sensitive. You see what I mean? They just, nobody had thought, oh look, you don't need to measure anything that high, and yet that had to be measured. And that was the whole, plus the fact that we had things like plutonium and things which nobody knew anything about to speak of. And how in the world do you make, say, an instrument to measure plutonium? If you're going to fire, I'm speaking now about firing off a bomb down at Trinity, is what I'm trying to tell you. Mm-hmm. And it was a real problem because we had the originally idea was that I think with Oppenheimer and company that see, Chicago was still there, and there were people there that could invent this stuff too, but you know how it is, everything got too big. And so I wound up with 2 or 3 guys, and Dr. Hempelman was saying, Dick, we've got to have this, and you know, you start out with 10 guys, pretty soon there's 20 guys, and everybody had to be protected. So there was a real problem, and that was, I'm talking about Trinity now. Mm-hmm. I've skipped an awful lot of stuff.
Yeah, you're getting away. Yeah. I really want to know what you had to deal with up on the hill here, you know, for radiation.
Yeah.
You know, and if you could tell me, I'd love to hear the words, because
right.
I want you to say I had to invent a lot of things because a lot of it didn't exist.
That's right.
If you could use those words, I'd be very pleased.
Well, yeah. In those days, well, it's hard to explain to you because in those days, GE had come out with a, measuring radiation in those days. They had what they call a tube, which was invented by GE for measuring radiation, and that's all there was. Now this was an FP54, they call it, and the problem was that it was a laboratory thing, and so now here we are faced with a thing with going out into the field and with dozens of people, and somehow or other each one of those guys have got to have a machine, an instrument that will measure the radiation, and at the same time it will be in a different part of the spectrum. It would be a different, what would you say, higher values and things like that we had to look out for. And yet we had to be very careful now that we didn't overexpose people. And you might say, well, how in the heck do you keep from overexposing people when stuff like plutonium was practically non-existent? And yet we knew that what its potential was. We weren't stupid by any means.
Okay, I want you to say some words for me, because I think we're going around and around. I want you to say that, I had to invent a lot of things. I mean, those...
Well, yeah, I had to. I had to invent a lot of things, mainly because we didn't have... It wasn't possible to go to the commercial interests and find the type of instruments that we needed and at the levels that we needed and things like that. So the only way that I was stuck with was, well, how do I invent a machine, a thing, which will do this? And some of them are rather weird, but we got there. And for example, now plutonium is a beast, and there was a great deal of worry. I won't tell you about the setup down there at Trinity, although because there were 3 blockhouses, and there were people in the blockhouses, and these people had to be protected. And so here you're going to shoot off something with plutonium, and nobody had a foggiest notion of how that stuff was going to go, although they said, well, we're going to be real careful, and we're going to take cognizance of the wind and the rain and everything else, but there were people saying, well, isn't the damn stuff going to fall on us, and are we going to be breathing it? Well, that was a problem. And so what I did, and plutonium is kind of rough in that respect, because it doesn't have a much of a thing to grab a handle on, is the only way I can say. In those days we thought, well, there's alpha particles, which doesn't make sense to you, of course, but there's alpha particles, and there was I think it was a 17 kilovolt gamma ray, and that's about all there was, we thought. And so somehow or other we had to make instruments that would really measure this stuff, and it was a real problem. And I just had to, well, I just got lucky. Plus the fact that the stuff itself, the instruments you had to work with were not great. They did have what the Army did later, of course, is go to Victorine and Raytheon and those people and did make what is known as instruments to do this thing. But when I started, there wasn't, and what we had to do was to use standard tubes and figure out how to do it. So what we did was use tubes. The old 959 which was an acorn tube, which was a microwave tube. And here I was using a microwave tube for DC, and of course, but the nice part about it was we could order these tubes from RCA and things. So